Welcome to this program on exploring entrepreneurial journalism. This topic is what I think one of the most important topics in the world, at least in the world of news and the future of news. And in this program, we're going to focus on three core areas. The first is delving into what entrepreneurial journalism actually is and how we got here. How did we get to this news ecosystem that we now have today? What happened along the way? And where have we landed? And once we've touched on that subject, we're going to delve into the three core phases of developing an entrepreneurial journalism project. So how do you actually build something? And what are the key components of that process? And then finally, we'll share some resources and talk about next steps and how you can get going with developing your own project of any size, whether something really small or something more sizable. I'm Jeremy Kaplan. I teach here at the CUNY Graduate School of Journalism in New York City and helped start a new program in entrepreneurial journalism where we've helped more than 100 journalists in the last 7 years from 32 different countries start up new ventures of all kinds: websites, newsletters, apps, platforms, services, tools, virtually anything you can think of somebody has come here to work on. And I've been very excited to work with people across a range of different categories within the news world. And I spend most of my time teaching here at the J School, and I also have a background in journalism. So I spent a number of years working at Time Magazine covering business and technology and innovation and exploring how innovation happens at big companies like Google and Apple and AOL and Yahoo, and learning about how the innovation process works in the real world. I also have a personal interest in the subject of the future of journalism and entrepreneurial journalism because I have two daughters, and they'll be emerging as news consumers around the year 2030. And I think our news ecosystem will be quite different by then and will be shaped by a lot of the forces that I'll be talking about in this program and that we'll be exploring together. So first I want to offer a quick pulse check and a couple of questions for us to ponder as we delve into this session. The first question I want to ask is about whether you've started something of your own. And this could be something very small, it could be something sizable, it could be something that you never thought of as an entrepreneurial venture, but it required initiative and required you to take some action, take some risk, do something new that maybe you hadn't done before. And part of the rationale here is I want to get us thinking about not just how other people do this, but how you and I can do something new, how you and I can build something new, and how even something small can lead to something significant. For me, that significant step was in helping start this program here at the CUNY Graduate School of Journalism in entrepreneurial journalism at the Townite Center, where, as I mentioned, we have worked with journalists from around the world. And that was a really fulfilling process that we're still in the midst of, building a program that can serve journalists and the journalism community around the world. The second question I want to pose for you to ponder is about what news brands born in the last 10 years, so these are kind of baby brands or at least adolescent brands, do you rely on for your news and information? And I want to give you a second to pause and think about that, because really what we're seeing is the emergence of a new news ecosystem where we rely not just on the heritage brands or the traditional brands that have been around for generations, but increasingly on a small number of new news organizations that have emerged just in the last 10 years or so to help shape this new news ecosystem. And I think if you consider the number of news organizations that you personally rely on that have been born in just this recent period, you might be surprised at how influential this group of news startups has really been. And to give you some examples of the kinds of organizations I'm thinking of and I'm speaking about, they include organizations like BuzzFeed, and Mike, and Vice, and Vox, and 538, and ProPublica, and Fusion, and Politico, and Axios most recently in this recent political season, The Skim, and Now This, which specializes in video. So there's a huge number, and this is just the tip of the iceberg, of new news organizations that have emerged in an entrepreneurial way, have found a niche, have provided a solution, have provided an answer to something that news consumers were searching for. Finally, I want to pose a third question about what entrepreneurial journalism actually is. What does it mean to you? What do you think of when you hear that term? What does it say to you when you think about that? What comes to mind? Well, I want to share with you a few things that come to mind when I think of it and how we use the term here. And first off, it's really about developing new ventures along the lines of the ventures that I mentioned just a few moments ago. The new ventures that people use to consume news and to interact and engage with news now. It also is about creating a living laboratory for what's next in media in terms of technology. So there are lots of new projects now, for example, in the news ecosystem, taking advantage of new technologies, whether they include bots and drones or the Internet of Things and machine learning. Lots of new kinds of tools and techniques that technology enables for people to access news in new ways and to consume news in new ways, and even for news to be distributed in new ways. For example, with devices like the Amazon Alexa or the Google Home device or Apple's new home listening device, which allows you to listen to news in your own way, in your own home, through audio that's in your own environment. So entrepreneurial journalism is about exploring those new kinds of technologies and new kinds of opportunities and creating a living laboratory for that. It's also the study of new business models for news, because it's not enough in our current news ecosystem just to create new products and services. It's essential to think about and to develop sustainable new business models, which means finding ways for these new products and services that we create to pay for themselves, to create value in the world such that they can earn money and create a sustainable living for those who create them. And that's part of what we do when we think about entrepreneurial journalism, is we think about these new revenue models and how we can create products that actually produce revenue and eventually generate profit for the founders who create them. Finally, it's about solving the information needs of underserved customers and communities. Entrepreneurial journalism has the power and potential to make a big difference in news vacuums and to solve problems for people who aren't served by the current news ecosystem. And that can mean covering subjects which are historically undercovered, whether that's climate change or poverty in particular communities. It can also mean serving parts of the world that have been underserved, or creating products and services in languages where there hasn't been sufficient news, or on platforms where there hasn't been sufficient news, or to age groups that haven't been sufficiently served by the news ecosystem, and so on and so forth. This includes consumers who have particular accessibility issues or disabilities and require news to be presented in particular ways. So entrepreneurial journalism can be a lot of different things, and it can mean solving problems for people who haven't had the full benefit of the news ecosystem yet. And there are thousands of opportunities that lay out there waiting for enterprising entrepreneurial journalists to identify those